Well, I'm going to ask the callers on the line, John in Durham, Mark in Grays in Essex, Mark in Finsbury Park, Sean in Livingston, to hold off just for a minute, because I think the hot button story is the settlement in the defence budget. We've got Colonel Richard Kemp, former commander of the British Armed Forces in Afghanistan, who knows a thing or two about war and the weapons of. Let's hear what he thinks of that settlement. Colonel Kemp, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure, George.
Tell me, what do you think about this settlement? You'll be happy about it, I guess.
Well, I don't know. I don't think I really know what it is. I mean, I think my sort of disappointment with this process, to an extent, is that we don't seem to have seen any proper public debate about where the UK wants to be in the world and what defences we need to enable it to be there. And I think whatever comes out of this, if it hasn't followed on from a coherent analysis of where the UK should be, then I just wonder how meaningful it will actually be, and whether it will simply just be another what we've heard so many times before, smaller but better armed forces.
Well, I wouldn't, if I was you, put that to the public test. I remember a very great man, Rodney Bickerstaff, once saying, if you had collections outside public places for the armed forces and their Trident submarines and their aircraft carriers and the rest, and people collecting money for schools and hospitals and better public services, there's no prizes for guessing where most of the money would go. I think the fact that the military are going to get away with less than 10% cuts, whilst other departments are suffering 25 and even 40% cuts, will actually make people very angry.
Well, it might do. I don't know. I mean, I have to say, I haven't heard people expressing that kind of anger, the people I've spoken to, and before you say it, I don't just speak to people who've got a natural interest in defence, but I don't know if you can quite make that comparison. I think there's, to an extent, the judgment needs to be how much defence needs and whether what size of armed forces we need. Now, in my view, we're fighting a desperate war in Afghanistan, which shows no real signs of getting any better. We therefore, I believe, while we're engaged there, we need to make sure that we've got strong armed forces, that we support our troops who are fighting out there, and that, I think, is the absolutely first priority for our defence budget. And I haven't heard that many people, while there are plenty of people who disagree with us being in Afghanistan, I think the majority of people in this country would think that while we're fighting there, our troops should be properly supported.
But that's not what the money's going on, is it? Of what use to our troops in Afghanistan is £70,000 million on Trident submarines?
Well, it's not of immediate use to them, of course, but that's a different issue. I mean,
no, it's not. It's the same. If you were saying here that we need more money spent on defence to give our soldiers the right boots, guns, jeeps, helicopters and so on in Afghanistan, you're right. Most people would support that. But the big ticket items in this MOD budget are Trident submarines, aircraft carriers, new Typhoon fighter jets. They're of no use whatsoever in fighting the war that we're currently fighting.
You're absolutely right, George, and I think that this is the area that I am questioning whether or not there's been a proper review of the strategic needs of this country. Do we need those aircraft carriers? I don't know that they're necessarily a priority. They're hugely expensive, and not just the aircraft carriers, but even more expensive are the aircraft that will need to go on board them, and the maintenance cost of all of that. The Trident nuclear deterrent, yes, I mean, my personal view is that nuclear weapons have been invented and that they're not going to be uninvented. If this country does not have the ability to have its own independent deterrent, then in my opinion, the country is potentially more vulnerable to people that do. And in fact, the nuclear world is getting more dangerous with countries like Iran developing nuclear weapons, North Korea.
They're not developing nuclear weapons, but that's another item.
Sorry, what did you say? They're not developing?
No, they're not.
And right, okay. I thought they were.
Well, that's a bit disturbing, Colonel, if you thought that they were.
I think there's pretty strong evidence to
There's
suggest
no
they
evidence.
are developing
I'm not. The IAEA, whose job it is to monitor these matters, says, and I quote, there is, quote, no evidence, unquote, that Iran is trying to build nuclear weapons. That's slightly disturbing that you don't know that.
Well, I've heard that, but I've heard many other...
Well, you've heard a lot of propaganda.
That they are.
You've heard a lot of propaganda, but I've just given you the quote from the people whose job it is to monitor these things.
Yes, and these people aren't always right, are they?
Well, they're right a lot more often than the propagandists. I don't have to bring up Iraq to you, do I?
Sorry?
I don't have to bring up the subject of Iraq.
No, I don't think Iraq's developing nuclear weapons.
No, it isn't, but we were told that it was, and that was that's why we needed nuclear weapons, and that's why we needed to invade them.
I don't think Iraq having nuclear weapons was our justification for nuclear weapons. But you're right that the idea that the assessment that Iraq was developing weapons of mass destruction or had them was one of the justifications given for invading. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Indeed, and it was absolute bunkum.